My name is Jake Franco, and I will be presenting the efficacy of marine managed areas in Palau. Palau is an island nation located in Micronesia. Palau is a group of over 300 islands, with over 70% of the population living on the main island of Koror. According to the United Nations, Palau's economy, like many others in the Pacific, is extremely reliant on the ocean. Along with fishing, the economy also relies heavily on a large tourism industry. This tourism industry is primarily centered around the incredible ocean and resources that Palau is surrounded by in the Pacific. According to numerous studies, Palau's fish populations have recently reached an all-time low. This is attributed to many factors. This brings me to my research question. How does Palau effectively manage the marine managed areas, and how can their tactics be implemented elsewhere to improve fisheries health throughout the Pacific and beyond? Fisheries in the Pacific region have always been of great importance to the people of the area as a source of protein. Many islands didn't have the endemic terrestrial animals to eat that other parts of the world had for a protein source. This meant that many islanders resorted to the bountiful reef and pelagic fish that teemed in the ocean all around them, right up to the coastline. The fish themselves hasn't changed since these times, however, increasing demand and the advancement of fishing methods have. What is a marine managed area, and why do we care about them? A marine managed area, or a MMA, are managed regions of the ocean that either abolish fishing in them or have stricter regulations to improve the health of a struggling area. In theory, the fish populations inside of the MMA will flourish with a lack of human involvement. They will even then spill over eventually into the outside areas outside of the MMA, and then the fish can be sustainably harvested by fishers. The idea of the management of the ocean is a very tricky one, since there are many fishers who make their livelihood off of the resources of the ocean. This is of course there is of course a long-term goal of improving the fisheries, which will benefit everyone in the long run. But in the short run, some people are definitely more affected than others. This idea is important when in making an environmental policy decision to make sure all stakeholders are accounted for. Palau was quick to notice the importance of protecting their fisheries and took action by creating the Palauan National Marine Sanctuary, also known as PNMS. According to Blue Nature Alliance, the PNMS was first introduced in 2015, but was fully enacted in 2020. Also, 80% of the Economic Exclusive Zone, or EEZ, is protected under federal law to protect the resources of that region. The full size of the managed area is a staggering 295,200 square miles. According to the Stanford News, this large cover of marine managed waters is the sixth largest fully protected ocean area of any nation on Earth. The Palauan government saw the impacted pressure on the reefs and its inhabitants and saw the need to further protect the resources at hand. Palau hopes to inspire other countries worldwide to follow in their footsteps and create more marine managed areas within their own respected EEZ. In modern times, we live in a society where everything is seen as a commodity. Unfortunately, fish are susceptible to this phenomenon as well. With rapidly technologically improved fishing techniques and methods, as well as a high demand for fresh fish, creates a recipe for disaster among fish populations around the world. In ancient times, fishermen would take what they needed for their own families, and potentially for a few others. This was because the demand was exactly what it sounded like, the demand for fish for their family and friends for food. Nowadays, fishermen take all that they can to make sure that they can pay for the things that they need to survive. There's a huge disconnect between what fishing was like in the Pacific back then and what fishing is like now. Both pelagic and reef fish are affected by this overexploitation. Reef fish are more commonly overfished because they tend to occupy the same reef areas and they don't move around as much as pelagic fish do. Listed here are some facts about both kinds of fisheries. Although managing fisheries is great for conservation, what happens to the fishermen, though? The Palauan government is trying to steer fishermen into other, more sustainable professions that will allow them to still make a living working on or near the ocean. The Nature Conservancy leads the charge in having Palauan fishermen collect data about the fish populations. The fishermen are paid for this and firsthand see the decrease in both the size of the fish and the fish stocks over the years. Also, the face of scuba diving, known as PADI, claims that scuba diving is a highly profitable business in Palau, and the fishermen are already prepared to enter that industry with their boats. Also, according to the United Nations, the Palauan government is also interested in starting more mariculture and aquaculture operations in the region. Put simply, mariculture and aquaculture are fish farming techniques, and they are a much more sustainable way of obtaining seafood for the people of Palau. Many aquaculture productions are getting started, and I think that all regions in the Pacific could greatly benefit from more operations like these. It's very difficult to tell without speaking directly to the fishermen, but many of the online articles I read make it seem like Palauans are on board with protecting their fisheries. As previously mentioned, there was a study done by the Nature Conservancy to try to gather data about fish stocks in popular fishing regions in Palau. The study showed that over 60% of the fish the fishermen are catching weren't mature enough to spawn and reproduce. This gave the fishermen first-hand experience to see the dwindling health of the local fish populations. I'm genuinely curious what Palauans really think of this marine management plan, and if they're actually on board with ditching their fishing operations for other forms of income. To be honest, I'm a bit skeptical, since Palau, along with other Pacific nations, have always had a strong fishing culture and cultural connection to fishing. And I'm curious to see if they're actually interested in pursuing other economic ventures instead of fishing. One of the forms of media that I researched with was the podcast Island Innovation, and they made it seem like Palauans are fully on board with conserving their ocean resources. If this is felt through the nation, it is very difficult to tell. The idea of overfishing directly relates to what we spoke about in class about overexploitation. I feel like the Western idea of an economy has greatly influenced Palau and other countries in the Pacific, and how overfishing leads to overexploitation of ocean resources. This quote I found was from the PADI website, and it really resonated with me, and I felt like it directly related to my project. The greatest danger to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. Robert Swan. Mahalo for listening. I really enjoyed this project and this class. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Mahalo.